everyone. Welcome, welcome. So glad that you all are here with us today. We are going to have a discussion about a humanity-first approach to building the metaverse. So I have with me the very unique, very special, very brilliant, who I call Yoda of the metaverse, Mr. Christopher Lafayette. And I'm grateful for the mind of this emerging technologist who's been integral in making the metaverse what it is and making it possible for over a decade now. I am here as the Oprah of the metaverse in my first debut on the main stage with Mr. Lafayette, diving into the mind and the heart of your mission. So nearly a year ago, Chris posted his 7 standards of the metaverse. These standards are what means the most to him, but also about those who will inherit much of what we build. The first thing that he said was that the metaverse should be for all. And the 7 standards were humanity, accessibility for all, equality for all, education for all, community development, safety and privacy, and wellness programs. Moreover, he wanted people to come together and build with him. Chris, after having put on this wonderful 4-day GatherVerse summit that I had the honor of being a part of, that had over 10,000 attendees, sponsored by HP and Meta, what is the most important lesson that you have learned after having had time to reflect?
Sure. I would say that when we look at the magnitude of what's happened with GatherVerse and the attendance and this experience that I certainly have never experienced before on an event setting, the biggest and most important lesson that I've garnered from GatherVerse Summit at our inaugural event was that I'm not alone. That there are so many different corporations and companies and startups and individuals that have such a desire to build and that are geared towards human sustainability.
Absolutely.
That have dedicated much of what they do in business and much of who they are in business towards not only human sustainability, but have a desire to take a humanity-first approach to the metaverse. When we started this event, which is very different from our industry because for years we've had hardware and software focus as we should. But when we start to look at the progressive development of the metaverse, if you will, which starts from ideation, migrates to hardware, and then content, which is software-based,
right.
But then the next natural progressive step in the evolution and the development of this ecosystem is humanity. And we have platforms such as our friends at Meta, and we have platforms with HP, and we have platforms of the Virtual World Society, which was founded by Tom Furness, who is arguably one of the greatest technologists in the XR ecosystem, who has dedicated much of his career geared towards dealing with the heart and conscience of XR technology itself. We've had platforms and groups such as XR Women, which is a fantastic group comprised of XR women that are entrepreneurs and founders, and leaders, thought leaders, contributors, developers, DevOps engineers, designers, and creatives. We've had so many different organizations. Our very own partners here with Augmented World Expo, which we call AWE, also answered the call.
Absolutely.
And so we've had so many different platforms and leaders and individuals, not just corporations and nonprofits and groups, but individuals that contribute so much. And we said, hey, do we have anyone out there for education? Someone's, pick me, I'm here. Do we have anyone for accessibility? I'll do it. And safety and privacy and wellness, equality and community development. And we had over 10,000 people that came to find out with this technology that we've been building, this hardware and software that we've been afforded to hear, speaker after speaker, not just on this stage, but on other stages throughout this venue, And it's brought to the attention, Dr. Morris, what and for whom have we been building this hardware for? And so this is what's ushered us into a humanity-first approach to the metaverse.
So you've certainly illuminated the pathway for others, people who have been doing this work for such a long time. During the GatherVerse Summit, there was a lot of chatter and a lot of robust discussion in terms of how accessibility is going to be for all in the metaverse space. Now that you've had time to really listen to the thoughts of people, do you really feel like we are where we should be with accessibility, how far we have come and how far we have to go? What are the limitations that still present itself in terms of accessibility?
Sure. Well, on one hand, when we talk about accessibility, on one side of the narrative is, how do I access that which I don't know? Which, for us in attendance at events such as AWE and others, people are familiar to some degree with the metaverse or the XR ecosystem. But 97% of the world in civilization, they don't know what the metaverse is. If you go and ask them, they'll say, isn't that a 90s video game?
Right.
And so when we talk about accessibility, how can I access that which I don't know, number one? And two, when I do find out that there's this metaverse that exists, how do I get to the metaverse if I don't know where to go? And who will lead me? So that's on one side of accessibility. On the other side of accessibility, if I do come in contact with the experience and the opportunity to enter inside of the metaverse, this hardware or software that I'm about to use to do this, and if I'm part of our disability community, how will I know that this hardware and software that's built, for one, was it also built for someone like me?
Yeah. That's really powerful. The metaverse must be built for everyone in order for everyone to feel like it's built for them. And so we need a multitude of diverse voices to be a part of what we're building.
When I think about accessibility, Dr. Morris, and the 7 standards of the metaverse, the very next standard, which is critically important for awareness, is education. Now, given your background and your storied history of what you've done in education and what you do to this day, amongst other things, I must ask, from your lens perspective, when we talk about education in the metaverse, in the XR ecosystem, what does that mean to you today?
Education has always been the great equalizer, right? And so I am who I am because I stand on the backs of giants, other people who saw me as a student. What these XR technologies have allowed is for our students to be seen, to be heard, to be developed, to understand how to harness their own greatness, to develop worlds in which they want to inhabit. So I've been an educator for over 2 decades, and in my expert opinion, having seen decades of students from K-12 all the way through the college level and even professional level school, I've realized that this power that we have in our hands to develop a humanity-first approach to what we're doing in education is very powerful in making sure that our students are contributing, our young people, our next generation will contribute to the world in a meaningful way. It means that we see them, that we're able to help them, empower them to be the best that they can be. And so as the Metaversity director at Morehouse College, we have 450 Oculus Quest 2 headsets. We have a beautiful digital twin campus built by my dear friends Steve Grubbs and Victory XR. So happy to work with them. We have 9 other Metaversities that are coming on board, and I have created the blueprint of what culturally responsive spaces look like and what they can do to harness the power and achievement and unlock that engagement in students. And so it's utterly important that we start to really think about how education will be transformed using this metaverse.
No doubt, no doubt.
So, Considering that the metaverse will be built by all of us with a humanity first approach, this list of standards that you have, but this process that really comes about from it. Can you tell me how significant it is for us to have wellness initiatives that are also a part of what we're doing?
Sure, and thank you for sharing what you shared with education, given how important education is. I've come to appreciate as of late, there are so many people that have for so long been building platforms in the metaverse and XR ecosystem for education. And when I think about the impact that GatherVerse has had, it really serves as a bridge or as a supporting platform to help amplify these people that have dedicated so much of their time and precious resources towards creating very next level and new frontier technologies.
That's right.
On the heels of wellness, so the very next event that we had announced after GatherVerse in February at our inaugural event, we had announced an event called Free Spring Mental Wellness Summit. And a lot of people ask me, why tackle mental wellness? If you just saw a couple sessions ago with Caitlin Krause and Nia Reeves and their incredible discussion on wellness, I advise anyone to take a look at that when you get a moment. But when we talk about mental wellness, I felt that it was the next and critical next step for us to introduce to the ecosystem, knowing that it wasn't necessarily the most popular, it certainly wasn't a Ferrari, but I thought it was important. And when we had this event last week, we had a cohort of professionals that contributed and talked about the need for mental wellness, for its importance in our ecosystem activities that we engage in XR. And it so happened, very fortunate, that we had a successful summit, but it was on the same day that we had a very tragic event that happened in this country, in Uvalde, Texas, that I'm sure that many or everyone would know about, with one of the biggest atrocities that we've seen happen in this country contemporary to our time. And when people ask why the need for mental wellness summit, if we don't have mental wellness, then we don't have a metaverse. But on that note, Dr. Morris, I may ask, because you are a technologist, you are an educator and many things, but you're also a mother of 5 young men. I have to ask, because I just think it's appropriate, what does that look like from your lens?
As an educator, as a mother, as someone who my students, 2,200 young men at Morehouse College, call Dr. Mom, which I say is the molder of minds, it really hurts me to have seen this tragedy happen, because in some ways I feel as if we as a system, as an educational system, failed. We failed this young man, we failed all of the innocent victims and the lives that were lost. In some way, we missed something. We've taken so much out of education and made it so much about just gleaning knowledge from textbooks that we've forgotten about the human connection, the thing that connects us and creates emotive experiences for us, what makes us be one with one another. That you and I want the same things out of life. Those things that students are grappling with, we've left out of education, and we've left that out of education for far too long. And so my heart goes out to that community, but my heart also thinks about how can we better serve our students, our next generation, but also our educators. So what we did and what we've done is focused on educator wellness. So instead of trying to change education from this administrative point, instead of trying to change it by differentiating just strategies for students, but how can we really make sure that our educators are well in the midst of all of the things that they have to do? So mindfulness practices and using immersive technologies to be able to do that has been something that we have done in Atlanta in outreach. And then helping us understand that mental wellness does not have to be stigmatized, that we need to destigmatize mental wellness, and we need to bring back a 21st century skill that no one really talks much about, and that's compassion. So we talk a lot about creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and how to get our students to have all of these other hard skills and essential soft skills. But what we need to really think more about is how to create empathy in all of the lessons that we do, and how to bring compassion back into the classroom.
Right.
Speaking of which, we don't really talk much about compassion and empathy in terms of education, but one thing that education is also missing is a conversation about how our financial well-being plays a part in our own wellness. And so we don't talk about economic empowerment in schools, but we need to talk about it because ownership and autonomy actually matters in the real world, but it matters a whole lot in the metaverse, right? So can you speak to what the economic empowerment can be, how it can be amplified through a humanity-first approach in the metaverse?
And I think that's where the disconnect, and such an incredible question to ask. I think there is a disconnect when we start thinking about humanity-first standards versus what's being developed appropriate so in hardware and software. Is because I think a lot of people fail to realize the financial gain and economic prosperity that does come once we've achieved these standards of education and accessibility and equality and community development for all with the humanity-first approach. Look, the reality is that here we are in a situation in this world where there is a decline in natural resources. There is a decline when it comes to commodities and availability. There is war happening right now. We are still yet entrenched in a pandemic that has been unrelenting, that has affected and transitioned our industry. There have been some good things, but there have been things that haven't been so pleasant in its face. And when we talk about the 7 standards and what we do with GatherVerse, on the economic side of things, that is the point, or one of the bigger points of why we build and do what we do. Can you imagine that one day I'll be able to hyper-realistically go and walk down an aisle, but not in a grocery store, but to be able to walk in the aisle of a farm, and I'll be able to select produce, Dr. Morris, and this farmer will be able to take either my fiat currency or my crypto assets. I'll be able to purchase this produce, and instead of it going from farm to table, which we're accustomed to, it'll go to farm to door. Here I am able, by way of the metaverse, access things I've never been able to access, save for my local farmer's market or my local community market, and be limited to their supply chain. What do I mean by that? When the pandemic ensued, there were millions of produce and items that had to be discarded and wasted because it was only had one destination and its one intent was to go to restaurants. If we had more accessibility and more pipelines developed and greater communication, imagine the mirrored world that we can create for being able to access our commodities and resources in ways that we've never imagined before outside of antiquated, prehistoric systems of distribution.
Correct.
When we talk about economic prosperity and financial prosperity, I happen to believe that the more people are educated, the more we're able to build, and the more that it will create sustainability in homes for underserved communities and served communities, for those that are communities of color, and no matter the color and no matter the gender, everyone has the opportunity to benefit financially when we start to take advantage of these tools that we're building. And right now, I've come to appreciate that there are just as many people that you see here at AWE that are building incredible technologies for hardware and software. There are those that are building human-sustained platforms that are just as relevant, if not more necessary, to take advantage of and to help guide us towards these new destinations, Can you imagine if the pandemic hit and we didn't have Zoom, Hangouts, Blue Jeans? We would probably have toucans in a string communicating with one another. But we had these technologies that were ready. Who knows what's around the corner for what we may be finding ourselves expecting around the corner in this world that we find ourselves in today. So I say that with great earnest, that it seems to me that when Ori Embar, founder of AWE, got up and made the announcement this morning about all the things that he could have made an announcement for, they made an announcement that we're going to award $100,000 to those that can find and use this technology and to be able to have good solutions submitted for climate sustainability. He didn't say for a new SaaS system or a new headset, but for climate sustainability. Because the reality is, if we do not deal with the things that are around us, and if we don't take advantage of the opportunity of the tools that we have afforded to us, now we may come to a point where we may not have an opportunity to address these real situations that must be looked at. It seems to me that if we're relying for governments to be able to make these changes, we must consider that it's been said by a number of people, and we actually had the White House attend GatherVerse and speakers from GatherVerse, part of our Pete and Will House group community. We had the Assistant Secretary of Labor that attended, Pia Zaragoza, and more. Why? Because I can speak for the United States government or the European Commission or Parliament that they've admitted to themselves that Silicon Valley and other technology destinations are more advanced in technology than their own governments are. And the real reality is that it's us that attend these events and sit in these seats that are driving the human engine and the technology engine towards sustainability, and we are building that right now. And if we don't do this as the technologists that we are, then I submit to you who is, because, and I'll say this in closing into the next statement, what happens when the technology becomes more advanced than the technologist? I ask you that. What happens when the technology becomes more advanced than the technologist? Because we've become more virtual in the past 25 months than we have the past 25 years. And so here we are with this colloquial metaverse that we're now exploring into. But human sustainability, for me, must be the absolute first approach towards a sustainable and very healthy metaverse, Dr. Morris.
I love it. I love it. So, as we wrap, you talk a lot about chopping wood. If anybody has interacted with Christopher Lafayette, you will hear about him going to the forest and chopping wood. And the entire purpose of this is so that you could understand how to infuse humanity, the thing that connects all of us, into all of the work that you're doing with XR Technologies, as we start to think in terms of the metaverse and what Web3 looks like, what it feels like, what it is for all of us. How do you become a builder rather than a dreamer?
Well, for me, when I walked into the
40
forest,
seconds.
When I walked into the forest of business, I realized that I walked where paths were already created. Somebody had created those paths. But I also realized that now that I'm deeper in the forest, that my responsibility is to create paths for those to come before me. And when I'm done creating those paths, to leave a little light on for those to come after, because they will take what we're building today, just like we take what's been done and hand it to us. We will hand to another generation, and we only have a little bit of time to do it. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. You can contact Christopher Lafayette at GatherVerse.org. You can find me at UniteTheMetaverse.com. Thank you so much to this wonderful humanitarian, Mr. Christopher Lafayette, for your time and attention. Thank you, audience, for all of your love and opening up your hearts and minds to what we had to talk about today.